So welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Wednesday, October the 8th, 2025. Welcome to the show. It looks like Terry and Carrie both are driving. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Delighted that you're here and that we get to move our conversation to the next level. And looking forward to see how it unfolds. Had an interesting conversation with Terry yesterday. If you weren't on the show, Terry had taken the assignment from the Codependence intensive, the facilitated self-study, and was working with the pseudo solutions and decided to build a visual for himself of how much impact there was from the different power persons in his life. Do you want to say any more about that, Terry? Especially there are a couple of folks that aren't here, that weren't here yesterday.
I can say that for one, I had a pretty big excitement level of anticipation into getting in and working with the power person worksheet again with a whole new level of understanding and experience and being and all. And going through it is very conscious of the challenge, not only this time, but previous times, of reconciling exactly who the power person was. And I don't think that it's so important that I'm like nail it right on the head like mom and dad. They really shift back and forth, and they're certainly both qualifying power persons, but it's to come along with it that tells the story, So that exercise really helped me to see and feel those dynamics and brought up memories and other things to clear out and work with. So that's where I'm at with it.
Cool. Well, we'll invite everybody who perhaps hasn't been participating on a regular basis with the self-study, that it's tonight at 7 o'clock. And you might want to join us and be part of that conversation. But when Terry had, and basically what he did was he created himself an exercise where he just went through each of the pseudo solutions and made himself a chart. How many times did power person one do this particular, carry through with this behavior, that, and did a chart on each of them and came up with an interesting visual. And what went on for me, Terry, and why I contacted you to chat about it again today, is that what that did is it gelled about 4 this morning, which is usually my wake up breathe time, or the start of my breathe time. And I just had a whole picture of that exercise, and I'm enlisting you and of course everyone else for ideas. You can certainly text me any thoughts you have of how to put this together, perhaps how to visualize it, how to expand it. But what I saw was doing a chart. And first of all, one of the things to do was to notice where in my body I was storing the energy. When I tap into the power person dynamic, just notice where it's in my physiology. and recognizing, and I was working on this. I've been in a healing crisis. Some time ago, I had injured my foot. I'd hit something and broken a bunch of blood vessels in my foot, and it was pretty traumatic for a while. And day before yesterday, that started to open up. And so the next question that came was recognizing where I store a power person dynamic. And because the solution to everything in physiology is tied to the breath, to notice what level of effort it takes to get my breath there. And this morning, for me, that question came from me working to get my breath down to my foot to resolve that healing crisis, to resolve that energy. And it was significant. It took me about 2 hours to really get to the point where I could draw the breath into that part of my structure and get some correction moving there, some relief. And then I saw turning your idea of charting each person into kind of creating a scale for myself of what I need to do about overcoming the propensity toward each pseudo solution. You know, when you realize that in each of our bloodlines, 1,000 generations of people, relatives, genetic links, have lived in unresolved submission to this power person dynamic and the hopelessness of it when it takes over. And since most people, you know, you think about the people in our lives, since most people have no tools, there isn't even any awareness of that dynamic, which really means that most lives pass like unconsciously, literally into generational oblivion. You know, one of my early mentors used to say, a million people live and die every century and never even know they've lived. And that's something that was said to me almost 60 years ago. And I got the meaning of that with this thought this morning, that most lives pass unconsciously into generational oblivion because of these power person dynamics. Now, there's an option, you know, here are the tools, but most people don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Here's another place where Carl Jung comes up with a really powerful thought. He says, most people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Now, I think he was mistaken in using the word souls there. What he was really saying, most people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own unresolved fear, trauma, pain, hostility, and letting go of the generational addictions to covering it up with pseudo solutions. They'll do anything instead of doing what it takes to function in the presence of their power person dynamic based in conscious, active, present love. Imagine all the things that you face. If you could just allow yourself to take a breath, shift into the total physiological presence of love, the sensation, the delight, the joy of present love, and act from there in the arenas of conflict. And the confusion, that goes along with these pseudo solutions, they're all of the non-being mind. And it's interesting how most people don't have a clue how to handle their own minds, their own lives, their own relationships. Oh, they know exactly how to solve the world's problems. You can listen to them wax gross, which is an old scriptural term, about how everybody else should do it, but they can't solve their own problems. And then, of course, the solutions they offer to the world will mimic what they've tried to use in their own lives to straighten their own lives out, but it's never worked. And the solutions offered are always non-human. I think some form of hostility will fix, you need power, will fix that hostility. And hostility has never fixed one person's life in one circumstance ever. Repair will never come from anything other than the conscious active presence of love. So the work it takes to move back to that. And there's no other solution to healing hurting people. Doesn't matter what their race, their nationality, religion, or gender is, what their issues are. And the unhealed hurting people will continue to perpetuate the myth that hostilities are somehow sane and will produce the desired results. And of course, when somebody's in one of those pseudo solutions, they'll invariably blame it on someone else. And that sadly tends to lock people into family systems and those dynamics where people get lost for lifetimes. And again, the number one, every pseudo solution, but the number one pseudo solution is if I could just figure this out when there is no figuring out. But you can always, with any one of the pseudo solutions, forgive as to that and invite love to move through and be led by the breath through those closed channels to bring healing. Imagine living connected to love continuously. So I'm proposing, Terry, that out of your exercise yesterday, and thank you for it and for sharing it, that we create a chart that identifies the unconscious force that a pseudo solution will tend to exert over us. And do that.
Say that last part again.
Yeah, to create a chart, develop a chart that identifies the unconscious force that this pseudo solution exerts. And then start recognizing how committed do I need to become, recognizing the impact or the impetus behind that pseudo solution, the force with which it takes me over. How often will I need to breathe through that to get free? So what I'm thinking is assigning numbers from 1 to 10, and I'm looking at creating a chart that will come after the pseudo solutions in the Power Person worksheet. So assigning numbers from 1 to 10 for how often did my Power Person, when under stress, invoke this pseudo solution. So if it was, every time, it's 10 out of 10. Well, they did it occasionally. Okay, so it's 2 out of 10. So assigning a number to that would be one number that's going to help me determine, just to be conscious. Remember, the opening thought at the top of the whole Power Person worksheet is to become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions. If I can't step back and observe it, if I'm so locked into it that it's just rolling inside of me, I'm going to believe that it's simply what is, and it's the truth, and there's nothing I can do about it. So that would be one number. And then the second number would be what level of emotion generally for each of those pseudo solutions did our Power Person express their upset. So let's say, you mentioned that, mom and dad were equal in one or two of the areas. And one of them was just far out blotto in rage every time that pseudo solution came up. So if I've got a scale for what I need to do about that pseudo solution, I'm going to be able to kind of do an assessment, just a self-assessment here. This would just be a self-assessment tool for how much energy, what am I going to have to do to free myself of the compulsive engagement in that pseudo solution? So it might be, and at this point, I've just come up with 3 thoughts for recognizing here's what I need to do. One of them is I need to make a new commitment, a new level in for doing my work. Just making a new level of commitment. The second one assessment might be it's time to reach out for peer support. Now I've got a partner I work with, or someone else I've connected with through the work, or just to reach out to the radio show for support. Like I need to go to the next level. If let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, my power person did this particular pseudo solution 10 out of 10 times when they're under stress, and when they did it, they went mass unconscious blotto. I remember working with a guy in Florida years ago. In Fort Lauderdale, this fella had he'd been in the AA program for 35 years, and he invited me to come. He had an online AA meeting group, and he had a local one there in Fort Lauderdale. He asked so I come and speak, and I came and spoke, and I laid out the power person dynamic. And after the workshop, he came to me, and it was almost like he had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. It's like, Michael, that whole power person thing isn't true. That, when I was stressed, I do the behavior my power person did that I hated the most, because when I was a kid, and he talked about how brutal his father was, like virtually daily, he said his father would beat him, and his word was mercilessly. And he said, and I have a son, and I've never laid a hand on my son. And I acknowledged him for the wherewithal to be able to keep from doing that. But then my next question, I could have bowled him over with a feather. Because my next question was, okay, I got it. You had enough wherewithal to refuse to do that. And how much time? You've been sober for 35. How much time do you still spend having to control your fists? And it was like, oh my God, that's what comes up in my mind all the time, is the resolution is to hit. So if I see that, this was a level 10, every time they were under stress, this is what they did, and their level of hostility in it was a level 10. When I've got a 20, I know, like, this is one I really need to do some work on. I really need to be conscious of this one. So it might be, that I reach out for support from a peer or the radio show. Or maybe if I got a level 20, if I've got 2 charts and, there are 2 or 3 of them that gone to level 20, that might be the time. If that one's moving, like that one's up in my face and it's time for me to look at it and deal with it, then that might be the time when it's time to reach out for professional support. So that's, as I breathe through, and about halfway through dealing with the healing crisis in my foot, working to get my breath there, this whole visual unfolded for me out of what you presented yesterday. And so it will be a new piece in there, and I'm bringing it to the community just because this is the way this whole body of work has developed. Thank you, Terry, for someone like Terry bringing forward. Well, Michael, what about this? Oh, God, I've never thought about that one. Yeah, and let's turn it into a tool. Let's turn it into, how can I do something else? What do I need to do to motivate myself? What do I need to do to really recognize this is something I need to do something about? So, Terry, the fact that you created that tool spontaneously out of the assignment to do the power person worksheet, when you got down to those pseudo solutions, I would just love your thoughts. That's why I asked if you'd be open to being on the show to begin and open that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that you said that resonated with me very strongly was when you mentioned examining what part of the body you were feeling that in.
Yes.
And to look, because that's part of that focusing exercise, is you follow the feeling down into your body, which is a similar thing. But this is at a deeper and connected level, and you've already brought it to the surface. by doing the work that laid the foundation for it. And one thing that I will add is that when I was about 6 years old and experienced probably the worst trauma that a child could experience, pretty much close to the worst. Anyway, that's when I completely learned how to off from any feeling.
Disassociate.
I could disassociate completely, and I mean perfectly, and that followed me through my juvenile years, and it manifested as criminal behavior. Because like when I was 9 years old, I led a gang of my cousins, and we broke into a school and stole all this stuff, and my father turned me in because he knew we were going to get caught. He said, first he tried to burn my clothes to hide the evidence. And then he got rid of the cousins, and then he came back and beat me until I told him what really happened. And then he went over there and turned me into the police. Okay. I was 9. And through that whole time I was able to, and I'm bringing up emotions right now, obviously, and well, maybe not.
Breathing with you.
I was able to completely detach, dissociate, carry on conversations. It would be like a cold-blooded killer, is what you would say, or something like that. Just and what I gathered from that later on, after years, about 3 years or so in sobriety, being free from the alcohol and drug addiction, was that I got it. That's how people commit murder. And it had gotten close one time where I was involved in a thing that involved attempted murder, and it was like that was what was going on. People were dissociated, and there was no
Well,
feeling.
actually, this would be a place for me to apply the word disassociated. That when we're in denial and dissociate, we take this energetic dynamic that's going on inside of us, and we literally hide it from ourselves and substitute a constructed reality that we lay over top of it. So the truth we dissociate from, because once I've instructed my mind to tell me a lie, oh no, they made me mad, I'm going to construct a picture of them out of my mad, and I'm going to believe it because that's the picture I see, and the truth of what my mad is really about, I've dissociated from. And I would use the word disassociate to describe what you're talking about, where it's like, I don't even have any connection with this. This is somebody else type thinking.
Well, those words, I've been looking at those very closely since we started the Codependence. It's like, yes, there's a difference in a very, very big difference in dissociate and disassociate.
Yes.
And what you're saying, I think what I hear you saying is that dissociate is when I step back and just project and deny it, but disassociate is when I've totally blocked it out, removed it, and become someone else. Is that?
Yeah, I'm disconnected from it totally. Yeah. That would be how I would describe it. That isn't necessarily in some psychological circles today how the word is used.
Yeah.
My team did
Maybe
really
we could get
well.
somebody to mute themselves there.
I'm silly.
Hello. Okay, go ahead, Terry.
Yeah. So, and another thing that I realized after a period of sobriety was that even after being arrested, I was arrested 17 times when I was out there doing my craziness.
Ouch.
And every time I never associated myself as being one of those people that were in the jail. I was different than all of them, but yet there I was. I was there. I was one of them. That took a long time for me to realize that I had become one. You know what I mean? I had this envelope or this bubble that I was going around in, and telling myself that, well, I'm not like these guys, but there was no explanation as to, well, how in the hell did you end up here then? It's like, evidently you are one of those guys, because here you are.
Here you are.
But I had that complete convinced myself I was not like them in any way, shape, or form. But yet, I didn't take it that one step further. It's like, well, what are you doing here? It took something bigger than just a little self-examination. It took a lot of work and effort to understand what you were doing and what was going on, and it was.
Can you
Yeah.
describe, Terry, with any other thoughts or words, what it took? Because that's what I'm talking about when I say that people get lost in this literally for lifetimes, that they're just totally and completely unconscious and lost in this generational oblivion. You could bet, I suspect, if you went back, you've described some of the trauma your dad went through, and I bet if you had a conversation, he'd say the same. Well, I'm not like that.
Exactly. He was above all of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely was not. He was different. He was better, smarter. Yeah.
Well, that's that insight from Carl Jung. Do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing,
Yeah.
the unresolved trauma, the fear, the pain, the hostility, and the addiction. To me, one of the biggest keys is breaking the addiction to these generational pseudo solutions and the generational story. That's one of the things that I've been seeing with each person that I've done quantum still point with, is that they're, and it's made me realize that the primary addiction is addiction to the pain and trauma of the non-being mind, the stories it tells. So can you put your finger any deeper into what helped you to make that shift?
Unfortunately, what it took was for me to be on death's bed. And I'd been in and out of consciousness for 5 days on an IV, when I came through, and there was a break in my psyche, or whatever however you want to call it. And
You had a near life
something,
experience.
yeah, something shifted. Yeah. And when they took me back to the room, they rolled me up in a wheelchair. I got on my knees and just said, I can't do it anymore. I had what I call a huge spiritual experience at that moment. Everything shifted. And so that is like, okay, that's the $1 million question. And that's what Wilson struggled with, was how do I give that to someone else and without them having to die? We'd always say, you can get off the elevator at any floor, but for us, we had to go down to the basement, way down on the elevator.
Here's my offering. Here's what happens at that moment. See if this fits for you. This is not a conversation we'd have. There's a point where for at least 1 minute, and that might, when I say a minute, I mean it might be 12 seconds, the mind quits. The mind, carbon-based memory, gives up and stops. That's what it takes.
Exactly.
When a person has what they call a near-death experience, near-life experience, basically, when clinical death occurs, carbon-based memory stops. When carbon-based memory stops, right? When carbon-based memory stops, then there is only being. There's only human life, and one steps into that experience. And then, if they're fortunate enough to come back to be resuscitated from that clinical death, then that's when a whole new process happens. The movie, and you can watch it now. I noticed recently that they have it on YouTube. Saved by the Light with Daniel Brinkley. It's powerful. He's struck by lightning. He is. I mean, I got to admire. I know Daniel. We've hung out a little bit, and I've got to admire him because he was an integral part of making the movie of his life story, and he allowed them to go ahead and show what a true SOB he was in his early life. And then when he's struck by lightning, and that's what I've been recognizing, and that's what happens in the quantum still point, is the mind quits just for a minute, just for seconds, and that's when that opening occurs.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it takes. So breathing with you. And it looked like perhaps Sally had something to share with us. You had your hand up earlier, Sally. Did you have a thought to inject in the conversation?
Not at the moment, but thank you. Thank you for the discussion. I'm grateful to be here, and I'll see you tonight.
Okay, cool. Well, does that resonate anything for anyone else? Anyone, anything to share? Question, thought, answer, idea. Again, recognizing, and I think it, I actually hadn't comprehended it this way before, but that idea that you hear me talk about so often of becoming a thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the action, being able to observe your mind in operation may be akin to that thing of there comes a point where carbon-based memory just shuts up for a minute, and that we have an opportunity to, when we can observe ourselves really, truly, that's when that shift occurs, where human life, where conscious active present love with the power of choice shows up in physiology, and it's no longer just run by that carbon-based memory system, what was referred to as the mind of man. So Linda.
Hello.
Hey there, young lady.
How are you?
I'm rocking. Doing well. How about you?
I guess I'm rocking. I'm not sure. Everything is going well. I had an excellent report for my cataract surgery. The ophthalmologist was absolutely delighted with the results of the surgery.
Sweet.
And I had an interesting experience in reference to our conversation about giving up the need to be perfect and heal my eyes myself. The night before the surgery, of course, I was awake and thinking about it. And I realized that I was tired of being in fear all the time and in opposition to things all the time. So I asked Uruha to help me feel safe instead of feel unsafe and afraid. And then I eventually went to sleep. And when I got up in the morning and I got to the clinic, one of the nurses had told me from the surgical center before that, she said most people who went in to have the eye surgeries were really scared. The whole sensation of having your lens ripped off and stuff. And the first time, and they would be very, very frightened and needed a lot of support and stuff. But by the second time they went in for the second eye, they just sailed right through.
Right.
And I thought, that's really interesting. And I was amazed. I was watching myself, and I was amazingly calm through the whole thing. And, my untrusting nature, just being hyper vigilant all the time and things like that. And I just noticed that I was really, really calm.
Sounds like you had a near life
and,
experience that night before.
Oh, I have no idea, but I am learning that one of my primary tools is to ask. And I'm very grateful that I am actually ecstatically grateful that I took the powerless route and that I took the helpless route. Because the one thing I knew about myself is that I would always go out into the center of the road, so to speak, and start yelling, help, help, help. And that somebody would always come rescue me. And what's interesting about that is I never made the connection before, but being in Dr. Tim's support group, and being and listening to the stories on the radio shows, both yours and Dr. Tim's, about people who've had traumatic experiences, life experiences, I have come to the realization, oh my God, I got 2 whole years with my father's side of the family. And I complained about it all my life, that I didn't get to live with them. And I got 2 years over the period of my whole childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my grandmother.
They gave you the gift.
Who saved me, yeah.
Mm.
Who just literally supported me. She never said a word. She just did.
It was just in being. Thank you, Granny.
Yeah, great gratitude.
What a gift.
And yeah. And I realized what Susan B. was saying at Dr. Tim's show this morning about somehow we just need the sympathy. I think what I heard with her is there is always a little tiny child in us also. There's always more work to do, right? There's always that unconscious dissociation that Terry was talking about. And there's always more. And actually, I think of it as parallel universes. You know, it's rather than we have these serial past lives, it's almost as like it's just the mini mansions.
Right.
There are many rooms in my father's mansions or
Right.
whatever it was.
Yeah.
It's all timeless. We're
Yeah.
in no time. We're in the present moment. And what door are we opening? You know, what room are we exploring in these parallel universes that we inhabit? And so the child comes up, tiny child, and she needs comfort, Michael.
Yeah.
He needs comfort. She needs comfort. And there is this, it's almost like your still point, this period of time, we need a grandma. You know?
Conscious active presence of love.
Yeah.
And
just spoon us.
that was given to you. That was given to you with your first breath.
Right.
It's yours too. And it was given to each of us with our first breath. That is the proper definition of the word, what people are looking for in the world when they're talking about salvation. It was given to us with our first breath. Free gift. Nothing to earn.
Right.
Nothing to do.
Right.
Just
Right. Just grandma reading us stories and listening to the Haven of Rest. Do you remember that old radio program on show, the Haven of Rest? It was a Christian program.
Never listened to that one. No, I wasn't aware of that.
My grandmother would listen to 2 programs every single day, and I am laughing, Michael, because I'm listening to 2 programs every moment I get a chance.
Cool. Well, breathing with you in that deep appreciation space, Linda. Thank you, Granny.
Yeah. And that's what
I
I
had a
can be.
grandmother
Is I
like
can
that
just
too.
be a
So
granny. Pardon?
I can identify with you fully. I had a grandmother like that. There were 4 kids in
Yeah.
my family, and every chance I had, I went and stayed at Granny's house. None of the other kids would do it, and I'm like, man, I was
Right.
there like glue. So I can
Yeah.
identify with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
sweet,
yeah. Yeah.
awesome.
And then
All
my
right.
maternal grandmother was the teacher. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
sweet,
I was blessed with 2 grandmothers. She didn't know how to express that love emotion, but she was there for me.
nice,
She was the teacher. Yeah.
very
So I'm
sweet.
going to be a granny. And what Susan was asking for, sympathy, is sometimes we just need that granny there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'll join you in being a granny. Only I'll probably
Hey,
be a
it's cool.
papa.
And every now and then there's a grampy who's just like it, Michael.
Yep.
But rarely. So the grannies and the grampies, that's what we need.
Yeah.
To get us through that still point to where we can wake up and say, the salvation is an inside job.
Yeah.
And
And what I
everything
realized,
is an inside job.
what I realized from my perspective is my gift was my granddaughter, my grandson, and being able to just realize that being that for them was so important. And I'm realizing it as you're saying that, I'm realizing that that was what, how do I say it? It was giving that gift, that same gift to myself on a whole new level by giving it to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, because every time I give the Grammy or Granny, or Grampy gift, every time I do that, I am healing myself. I'm healing that little inner wounded child.
Yeah.
We can't outgive life, Michael.
That's right.
Impossible.
That's
now,
for sure.
I have one question to ask you. On those pseudo solutions you gave, is there one for hysteria?
That hysteria would be a form of
am-
obfuscation. If you read the one on obfuscation, my take would be that's what hysteria is.
Okay,
It's
this
a way
is
to
the
just so confuse
situation.
the space and cover the situation, the space up with an energy that nobody can comprehend, nobody can understand, and it just blows the whole thing out.
And that's what I do when I am ultra stressed in the safety department. And there's a connection between somebody driving somebody else driving, and we're in a really dangerous situation, or I perceive it as a very dangerous situation, or I perceive it as I'm not going to get to, say, an appointment that has to do with my welfare. Yeah, something like that.
That sounds like that would be your key goal to cancel. That would be the worksheet to do where safe. That is the key goal.
Safe. To be
and
safe.
That's
to
what
be safe.
Will open that dissociated content.
Yep. That's always my key goal. It's that so I can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second half of the goal. Yeah.
No, breathing into that one with
Beautiful.
you. All right, young lady, holding the space. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Miss Andrea, you had your hand up?
Hi, I did.
Hey there, welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate this whole conversation. I love how you're terming it near life. And, the last few years, it's interesting because when I hit what has felt like my biggest awakening yet in 2019, I thought that life was going to be perfect now. And what I mean by that is
You
that,
thought your work was all finished, and you now
well,
realize it had just begun?
no, it was more like, it feels like at that time it was so easeful because the contrast in my consciousness went from, what you're terming like deep carbon-based thinking, ego,
Right.
into just such a heightened state that the contrast was so liberating. And, instead of like doing a few layers, it feels like a whole bandwidth of consciousness cleared. And so, anyhow, then I had a couple of, I love how you're calling it near life um, situations. One in particular where I thought all the bad things were over in my life. And then this incident happened, and I had no breath until it felt like I died. And, but
Mm.
when I came back, um, it was it feels so. I guess what I'm trying to say is it feels like the more I break through the illusion, almost like the more intense the pain, like the density gets, and also the lessons. Because even though I was doing really well, deep in my own spiritual practices, and really felt like I was being cradled in love all the time. But I was still dabbling, is what I want to say, in painful patterns as like a
Right.
familiarity that I would go back to, a couple of times a year in this particular situation, and that had gone on for a few years. And I went through such a betrayal when this incident happened. The content doesn't really matter. It was just this near death experience. And it was like that part of me was asking to be faced and looked at, and I didn't know how to look at it. And then this incident happened where it was this near death experience. And that part of me through that finally had the opportunity to die, if that makes sense. Because it was like the pattern was saying, if you continue this pattern of behavior, you're actually going to die. This person is going to kill you. It won't just be almost, it's going to be, but it wasn't like, I don't know how to explain it. It's basically like, so that part of me could die. But at the same time, I definitely felt very abandoned and betrayed by the higher ups, whoever you want to call it, that I would have to be that serious to take the lesson, to actually embrace the lesson. Same with the car crash. It was like I was totally off track. And then I really went off track down a 60-foot bank, right? It's like, that's what I mean. It feels like the lessons get more intense and more intense. So I'm just curious what you would share around that.
Well, each time you hit a new level of vitality, you're empowered to go to a new depth of what needs to be dealt with, for sure. And so it's going to you're not going to deal with the deeper levels of what needs to be handled in your genes or in your own life until you hit that superior level of vitality. And it sounds like you were able to drop. Yeshua talks about, in order for you to live, you've got to die. This self that is false, that is nothing but a product of carbon-based memory, has to crash. And its crash is usually not Dr. Feelgood. And when you allow it to let go fully, it's like, where the Course speaks about forgiveness. There's now a clean and open space within your mind for human life, for being to show up, to be experienced directly. And that's the near life experience. That whether, I don't suggest that people run out and find themselves in near life experience, because it gets a little risky to hit clinical death and count on coming back. But my take is that each time you do the forgiveness process, a la first century Aramaic Yeshua, each time you do that, what happens is that non-being self collapses. There's even, it's just like for an instant, mind can come back so fast. But when you cancel that goal, that self collapses, and that's a miniature near life experience. And as you do your work, those spaces get broader and broader and broader and broader, until now you're living out of the true state of being, the true self, rather than this false self that's just a reflection of generations and generations and generations of pseudo solutions, behaviors. That would be my take on it. Does that fit? Does that make sense?
Yes, that definitely all fits and makes sense. And I just really appreciate the container in how this is being talked about. I can feel layers of victim shifting for me, of like, oh yeah, like this is a part of it. Like this is a part of awakening. It's like this death and rebirth cycle. And that I'm not special, and I'm also not being punished. It just is the line, the ancestral line that I came in on. And it's not personal, like I'm not bad and I'm not all these things. And interesting that those two big incidences would happen within a 5-month span. Like so much has shifted. And then finding you guys, I was so dysregulated, because it was just so scary of like, is this going to keep happening? Like what really is happening here?
Right.
So I'm just finding like even this container is just super supportive. And then one thing that I wanted to just add in the, what do you call it again? Pseudo solutions. How do you pronounce that again?
Pseudo solutions.
Thank you. On the bottom one, when it says smartest, I thought spiritualist too, because I had a very big spiritual ego for quite some time. And for me, I look back and I strategically picked the spaces where I would be the most spiritual in the room, so that I could feel safe and comfortable
Superior.
and exposed, yeah, superior. So I've replaced smartest, just because that hasn't quite been the same thing, but it holds a hue of most spiritual. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Mm. Yeah, you listen to that beatitude that talks about the meek, and the meek aren't people who go, oh, go ahead and beat me up. The meek are those who are able to let go of all of that and just stand in that space of being, stand in the space where they can see the truth about themselves and others, and just be that space. And that's what's going to, that's what the shift is going to look like when we let loose of this non-being mind, be my take. And I'm excited for the fact that in just a few weeks, you're going to be here and you're going to get to do some still point breathing. And I'm really looking forward to how that's going to fit for you. What your experience is going to be like.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, any other thoughts for you?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
All right. Delighted. Thank you. Glad you're part of the process. So Terry,
Yes.
going to drop back and just wondering if that idea of a chart, any thoughts come to you on the idea
Yes.
of a chart, how that fits? What?
Because I was playing around creating a kind of a chart on my paper when I was doing all um, assigning the numbers and assessing and all that. Hey, there's a couple things I'm gonna throw out right quick. One, a guy told me, he says, "Hey, buddy, it's easy to be a big fish in a little pond." That's why he was putting me in my place with my spiritual pride, you know. So
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, that really got through to me. And I was like, I get it. And the other thing was one of the exercises that we used to do. I believe that the energy that is accumulated from doing a group work intensive and all that. I used to think it would only be in person, but we've come to the point where we don't have to be in the same room. But the Zoom is getting very close to me, providing that same energy boost and level with working with others. Was that when you give us the assignment of a mind shifter, and we would write it for at least an hour, as I recall correctly.
Yep.
And one, you're right on with the commitment. Make a new level of commitment. Be committed to what you're doing. Get in there and really commit. And then, like, I was committed doing those. I remember the one that I really, really did at a deep level that just kept going and going, and the mind dump and all the crap that was coming out. And then the breath session after that was magnificent, you know, and it was a predecessor. I think it helped to get to that place of the empty mind that we were talking about, where the thinking was stopped.
Right.
Just by doing an intense mind dump. Now, most people complained about that, didn't want to do that level of work, because it was a lot of work to keep yourself focused and attentive on that. And with the and back to your chart, yes, I'm all in on that. I'll start mapping out a little bit. You start mapping out a little bit. And let's see what comes up from that.
Yeah. And anybody else that has any thoughts, how to assemble that, would appreciate input. And as you mentioned, commitment, we'll close out with that thought. There's a gentleman, W.H. Murray, and this goes back about 75 years ago, actually 1951. There was a Scottish Himalayan expedition, and this guy wrote about the power of commitment, and here's what he says. But when I said nothing had been done, I erred in one important matter. We had definitely committed ourselves, and we're halfway out of our ruts. We had put down our passage money, booked a sailing to Bombay. This may sound too simple, but it is great in consequence. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidences, meetings, and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. I've learned a deep respect, he says, for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Only engage, and then the mind grows heated. Begin it, and the work will be completed. And they were the words spoken in the play Faust. The manager spoke those words in Prelude at the theater. Indecision brings its own delays, and days are lost lamenting over lost days. Are you in earnest? Seize every minute. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So thank you for bringing up that idea of commitment. It just really resonated. Murray's statement is so powerful about commitment. So joining each and every one of you in commitment, holding you in a blessing. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.